Welcome back to the second hour of our program. Thom Hartmann here with you. Carrie Lukas on the line with us, the Vice President of Policy and Economics at the Independent Women's Forum, IWF.org. And Carrie, congratulations on the birth of your new child.
Oh, thank you so much, Thom, and thank you for the kind mention. You gave it a couple weeks ago, right after he was born. I really appreciated that.
Tell us again the details.
He was born on April 28th, so he's just will be 3 weeks old tomorrow, and his name is Patrick, and a little over 7 pounds. So
wow.
Healthy, everybody's doing well. He's a pretty good sleeper, so far so good.
Yeah, well, that's great. And congratulations on Louise and I watched you on 2020 with John Stossel.
Oh, thanks. I bet you agreed with every word I said.
Well, I find it interesting because the last time I was in New York, John Stossel had me by, and we did a thing in the studio on the economy, and he ended up not airing my segment, I think because I disagreed with him in a way that he couldn't rebut. There's, some fairly selective editing on that show. And the point that you were making, I thought that there was a certain amount of there was a certain level of disingenuity, if that's a real word, to it, in that you were suggesting that your job, that you, as an employee of the Independent Women's Forum, should be able to be fired because you were pregnant. And in fact, under current federal law, you could be fired because you're pregnant, because the Federal Family Leave Act only protects women who work in corporations with over 50 employees.
Well, no, I don't think that's. I think the Family Medical Leave Act certainly doesn't apply to me, but I believe discrimination laws can be exercised at any an institute of any size. But I think that you need to think a little bit broader when we're talking about this issue. What we're talking about is what's the proper role of government in determining what the terms upon which an employment contract, an employment by will or by free decision of me to take and accept a job and for an employer to offer me a job, when those things can be terminated. And absolutely, I think it is a bad business practice for an employer to decide to fire those who get pregnant. I think it's
so basically, you don't think that the government should be involving itself in the relationship between an employer and employee?
Yeah, on the most basic level, I think that government causes as many problems as it solves, and too often I think that those problems, the problems that they cause, are just really overlooked or ignored in these discussions.
So I assume then that you're opposed to laws that require mandatory overtime for more than a 40-hour week?
Yeah, I am.
And you're opposed to a minimum wage?
We've talked about that one before. I'm definitely opposed to a minimum wage.
You're opposed to employers being able to fire people because they're black?
Well, I think that's, again, and I know that people out there are saying, like, what, is she crazy? Like, these are the most egregious, horrible things
or gay.
For employers,
if somebody comes out,
to do.
If somebody comes out and says, hey, I'm gay, the employer can't fire them. What about, and I understand philosophically, and I salute you for holding to the philosophy, which is absolutely in concurrence with those of the largest corporations in America and the wealthiest people in America. I think that frankly, you're being a sucker for those folks and not for yourself. I mean, what if you were a single parent and you were pregnant, and let's say that 2 months into your pregnancy your husband died, and you had no other source of income than your job, and your employer decides, Carrie, we don't need you anymore, you're out on the street.
Yeah, it would be, that would be a terrible thing, and we know that still happens.
Don't we as
today.
A society have an obligation to protect those among us who are vulnerable to large corporate predators?
I think that we can all talk about protecting people, those who are the most vulnerable in society, but the question is do you really think that right now there aren't people being fired who because they're black or gay or pregnant? Of course, we know, and I've gotten dozens of emails from people who say, like, I was discriminated against, and, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, I know, we know that even right now, in spite of the fact that, oh my gosh, even though the government has a law, something terrible still happens. Laws don't make things go away. In fact, the problem is that what happens is by creating laws, it can serve as a deterrent because the employers recognize me or gay people or black people or people who may become pregnant as potential litigation.
So should we do away with laws against robbery?
No, there's a big difference between that, Tom, and
How?
Because it's not voluntary. The decision of me to take a job at a corporation is a voluntary one. The decision of them to hire or fire me is a voluntary one. Robbery is different in the same way that murder is different.
Carrie, in a nation where pretty much the only way that you can get health insurance, the only way you can protect your life, and in the case of a pregnant mother, protect her child, is to have a job, I would submit to you that being employed is not a voluntary decision. It is a necessity.
But okay, but then okay, I want a job. Like, somebody owes me a job.
No, nobody owes you a job.
Who has to supply that to me then, Tom? Well, you're saying it does. You're saying that my current employer has to continue supplying me a job. What if they run out of money? Let's say that my employer starts to go belly up. What if they have?
Well, then they go away. I mean, there's provisions for that. But my point is,
I'm going to sue them because I've recently been pregnant. So there's, this is something where it's a real fear for employers, and right now we have a growing number.
Carrie, what I'm saying is that let's take this to the larger issue here, and that is why do we as a society make it so that when your employer, the Independent Women's Forum, or when I went down and filed our papers to incorporate with the state Secretary of State in our respective states, and we were granted a whole set of rights and privileges, particularly under the IRS code, but in a lot of other areas as well, that a normal citizen doesn't enjoy. And we were given all kinds of rights and privileges and special treatments by banks and special treatments under the IRS and the ability to deduct things that average people can't deduct and the ability to limit our liability, our corporations can't go to jail, all these things. When all those privileges were given to us, they were given to us for a reason. And that reason was that we as a society collectively have agreed to give these benefits and these powers, frankly, to these corporations, in exchange for them behaving in a way that advances the public good. And the position that you're taking is to hell with the public good. It's not about the public good. It's about whether or not some guy can get rich. And I would submit to you that that is absolutely inconsistent with the founding values of this country.
Tom, I don't know. First of all, I think it's an offensive leap to say that when my position says it's about some guy to get rich. No, it's about a basic freedom. You and I can disagree on what is. I'm presenting an empirical question. I actually think that you are going to be better off. That a woman like me is going to be better off with less government regulation that makes it more likely that I'm going to have job opportunities. You're going to disagree with me, but it drives me crazy when everyone on the left assumes that I'm this ogre woman-hating or tool of the.
I haven't used any of those phrases, to describe you, Carrie. But if this is true, then can you describe to me any country in the world operated along the essentially libertarian perspective? John Stossel's out as a libertarian, essentially libertarian perspectives that you're arguing, where there is a high quality of life, where there's low infant mortality. It turns out that those countries that heavily regulate the workplace, those countries where they say, in exchange for doing business in our country, you're going to have to do it in a way that's socially responsible. Those countries are the countries that have the highest, according to the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, they just published this study this week. Those countries are the countries, principally Scandinavia and Northern Europe, that have the highest levels of happiness. They have the highest taxes, but they also have and they have the highest level of government intervention in the marketplace. But their people are the happiest. Their people live longer than we do. Their people have fewer anxieties than we do. They have lower suicide rates, with the exception of Finland, than we do. They have lower problems with crime and drug addiction, and on and on and on. I mean, give me an example of where your libertarian paradise has worked.
No, there hasn't been a libertarian paradise. It basically hasn't been tried. In the same way that your socialist and communist paradise of where everybody has everything equal hasn't worked very well.
Well, I'm not a socialist. I'm not a communist, Carrie. I'm a social democrat.
But there's very few examples. Right now, we basically have socialist Europe, and we have places like the United States. So I don't have a libertarian example to give you. But it's funny because I do think that there's something with this idea of basic liberty. I'm not going to say that everything is going to be solved by deregulating the marketplace, but I do think that there's a point at which we should be questioning. When you talk about how happy everyone is in Europe, It does sound like we all want Big Daddy government to tuck us in and wake us up in the morning and make sure.
I'm not suggesting any of that, Carrie.
But I do think that this idea that we have fewer worries. Those living in Europe have fewer worries. They also have a lot less liberty. They have much less control over their lives and their destiny.
They have less freedom to die from a disease.
They have less freedom less control over their lives. And yet, at some level, I think there is this, it's kind of pathetic, this idea that we want government to take away any bad thing that could ever happen to us and take care of us and just have this moving down of
Carrie, I think you're speaking in generalizations here. You want to stick around?
No, I actually can't. I've got kids in the other room unattended.
Okay. Well, that's a good one. All right, Carrie, thanks a lot for dropping by.
Thanks.
Carrie Lukas, IWF.org is the website, Vice President of Policy and Economics at the Independent Women's Forum. And congratulations on the birth of Patrick. We'll be back.